Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio. I'm your host, Denise Griffitts, and this podcast is ranked in the top 2% of the most popular podcasts globally. And honestly, it's all because of my truly incredible guests. And I feel so incredibly fortunate to spend time with people who are at the top of their game, and they are passionate about helping you achieve your goals in both your personal and professional lives. And my guests hold nothing back. They're here to share the secrets of peak performance with us. And I know you'll find their insights both inspiring and actionable. So sit back, relax, and get ready to take your life and your business to the next level. And my guest today, I'm really excited. My guest today, Prachee Kale, is helping introverted techies, and I is one, become superstar leaders and bringing design thinking to cybersecurity. She is combining her 17-year expertise in cybersecurity, business strategy, DEI, and executive coaching through Think.Design.Cyber's unique offerings. And she is the CEO and co-founder of Think.Design.Cyber and Executive Fellow at CyberTheory Institute. Now, this is why I'm excited. She's joining us today to talk about introverts, which is a topic very close to my heart. As I mentioned, I am one. I'm not shy, not even close to shy, to be honest. And to keep on being honest, I don't have much in the way of filters, so sometimes I really don't need to be around other people. But imagine my delight during the pre-interview when she said she could speak extensively and passionately about introverts and just how we contribute in the world. So she's here to share why she feels introverts are important as a voice of change and how they can create force. I can't remember what I was going to say there, without changing their personalities. In short, she joins us to dispel myths, stories, and bias about introverts. Prachee, welcome to Your Partner in Success Radio.
Thank you, Denise. It's an absolute pleasure.
Well, we had a terrific pre-interview. I was popping up and down in my chair going, ooh, yeah, this is so close to my heart. And in the pre-interview, you didn't mention this, but just now in the green interview, the green room, it's Monday. I'm excited. Pardon my boo-boos here. But you just mentioned that you're getting married in a month, so congratulations.
Thank you.
So tell us about you. I mean, how did you go from talking about introverts to cybersecurity? I mean, that's a wide path you're walking down there.
Interesting when people ask me that about my career, I tell them it's happened more by a process of elimination than selection. I have gone all over corporate America in many different areas, especially, business strategy, DEI and such, and have an extensive background in management consulting. But throughout that process, I started to do some projects in cybersecurity, learned and immersed myself in the subject matter experts. But the common thread in all of that was a lot of mentoring and talking to, my peers, people who were, behind a few years in their careers and asking for advice and things like that. And a lot of them really had hopes, dreams, and desires. And the commonality was somehow I attracted them into my life, and they claimed themselves to be introverts. And as you just mentioned before I'm getting married, my fiance is an introvert. My younger sister, she's a movie director. She commands a set of up to 1,000 people at a time when they're shooting a movie and on a set. And she claims to be an introvert. My best friend is an introvert. And all these people I met in my corporate life who I had the opportunity to contribute, to their life through mentoring and coaching, claim to be introverts. And a lot of the conversation then became about what they labeled themselves as and what that meant to them and how they saw that as an impediment to their growth or in achieving those, hopes, dreams, and desires. they saw for themselves. And that really sort of led me down this path of saying, okay, so right now, these are all my strengths. These are all my portable skills. I love the idea of helping people advance in their life, in their business, in their careers. And cybersecurity, again, just by the sheer number of introverts I was coming across, became a no-brainer. So I was rather led to the choice of working, in the space in cybersecurity and sort of blending that with the ambition of helping introverts succeed in their life, really.
And you wrote a wonderful LinkedIn post this morning where you referenced this podcast and where you said, in part, there are too many who feel it's hard to put oneself out there in this loud world. Their voice remains unheard even when there is so much value to offer and is needed more than ever. And then you asked what I thought was a very important question. But what if it doesn't have to be that way? What if your introversion can be transmuted from a limitation, which you just spoke of, into your superpower? What if you could use it to win rather than lose? Great. Great question. I'm so glad I saw that this morning.
Yeah. And I feel like questions open up portal into our minds and our psyches and our subconscious minds especially, because what happens is when we label ourselves introverts and or extroverts or anywhere in between, we tend to then come to a judgment, a conclusion, a decision based on those labels, right? So I'm an introvert, therefore this cannot happen or this can happen.
And you described yourself just a moment ago in the green room as a trained ambivert, and I want you to talk about that. But I like you, I come across a lot of introverts, and some are just like, well, I can't have a podcast. I'm afraid of speaking. I can't do this. I can't do that. I'm going to tell you all right now, you and the audience, can't is a word that I will not use. I will use don't. I will use won't. And sometimes I'll use hell no. But I never use the word can't.
Yeah. And you just, sort of circle back on the childhood story. I call myself a trained ambivert, which for folks who don't know is sort of the middle, the middle level in the spectrum of introversion to extroversion is the term ambivert. You're kind of a little bit of both and somewhere in the middle in that spectrum. Now, growing up in India, I was the oldest child among 3 siblings, and I was basically trained to become an extrovert, or by nature of being an older child, helping out my family out there, my parents. When we had guests over at home, I would, get out water, serve them beverages, sit down and chat with them, or, come say hello to uncle, or come say hello to auntie, she's visiting you, and have those conversations. And I had to do that because I could not say no, right? They're my parents, and you listen like a nice, obedient child. And so I did not have a choice, frankly. And in that, maybe that was my parents' goal, was to sort of instill those social skills. But in that space, I really had to overcome the resistance to having social interaction. I didn't I just wanted to be left alone. And, well, I didn't have a choice, come out and talk to people. So that's how I, gained my conversational skills, gained my social skills, became really good at it. And for a long time, I actually used to think, well, I'm a really good extrovert. I can talk to people. I can, meet people and make friends and, set up great relationships, establish trust really fast. But over time, and especially in my mid-30s, when I realized, I really like my alone time too, and what's this about? And as I started to indulge in that, I realized that there's my coffee machine going bonkers there. I apologize for that.
I didn't hear it.
Okay, good. It just, of course, it was like the Murphy's Law. But anyway, so growing up then, not having a choice, I acquired those skills. I thrived in my career because of that too. And now, like in the last 6, 7, 8 years, I really started to enjoy my alone time. I really started seeking that. And that was an inquiry I made for myself. And I said, I'm really not enjoying social interaction the way I used to, or the way I used to think it's comfortable. And as I started to indulge in that, and having met so many introverts, I gave myself permission to explore the possibility that, is there a part of me that is really an introvert? And the answer turned out to be yes, surprising to me. And there you have it.
Why was it surprising? I always knew I was. As I was sharing with you in the green room, as I was growing up, I was called cold. I was called standoffish. Just all kinds of miserable things. And I would just look at people and say, who are you? Didn't matter if I had seen them in a class 4 hours ago. I didn't know who they were. I wasn't paying attention. I was in my own head. I was reading a book. I was thinking. Introverts think a lot. We're always in our heads.
Think a lot, introspect, yes. And which was surprising to me because those were not my dominant behavioral traits, right? I was, like I said, I was in consulting, which required a lot of, people interaction, required a lot of sort of conversations on a daily basis of all kinds, difficult and easy. And I thought that was my forte until a part of me just started feeling this pull to say, no, I need my alone time. I need to be away from this. Initially, I thought it was just burnout and, all those other things. But it really wasn't. It was that, I am part introvert. And it was surprising because I had never indulged that side of me and never explored that side of me. And I was resisting because of the biases that are out there, probably against introverts too, to say, well, what does that make me if I'm an introvert, right? And that was a check for myself. And I'm saying this, as your audience is listening to me, because sometimes you have to practice what you preach. So if I'm out there helping introverts, in some way it worked out because it came at a time that I realized what it really felt and meant to be an introvert so I could help them better. And also understand what it feels like when you label yourself or others label you as an introvert, like you said, and all those adjectives that go along with it, right, the negative ones. I think I resisted that for a little bit, and then as I started to see that, to say, okay, no, maybe that's not the truth, that's not the entire truth of it, I started researching, reading books about it, talking to more people, and really accepting the fact that, that is a part of me, that's a big part of me. And so being an ambivert was something that felt good to me energetically as well. And to say, I have both sides, and in some ways that is or in the biggest way, that's a blessing.
It is, and in some ways I'm an ambivert as well. I'm going to go with 90% introvert and 10% ambivert. When I'm out and about, people love to talk to me. I don't know why. I go out, I'm not joking, I go out with my baseball cap, my biggest Ray-Bans, and my resting bitch face on, and people still want to talk to me. I don't know why.
It's like you have a radar, right?
Yeah, I mean, people will stop me in the grocery store, in parking lots. The other day I was putting gas in my car, and I didn't need much. My gas gauge is acting up, and the man next to me said, you really didn't need that much gas? And I turned around and looked at him. I didn't even know he was there, to be honest. I said, no, I just don't trust my gas gauge. That opened up a whole new conversation. It's like, I just wanted gas, but it was fun. It was a fun conversation, but I never get away by myself. I just never do. So I've had to, people like us, and we don't know why, but it's okay. But one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about, Prachee, is solving the challenges that introverts face in their jobs. I work alone. When I got my computer science degree, the college wanted me to send me out on interviews. I said, oh, no. I will never work for somebody else again. I don't play well with others. I run with scissors, and if you want coffee, you can get it your own damn self. I'm not going to do it. So I created my business 20 years ago, and it's worked out beautifully. But I embraced my introversion because I finally went, you don't need to be out in public, Denise. It's not where you need to be.
Yeah. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs who also claim themselves to be introverts.
Mm-hmm,
and the question I ask them, and the question I ask both, entrepreneurs as well as corporate professionals is, well, what if we eliminate the word introvert? Now, how would you describe yourself and tell me what your problem is?
What kind of problems are they facing? I've talked with a lot of people and they say, well, people, they kind of ignore me. They don't hear me. They're not getting their voices heard is what I'm hearing.
Yes, I am overlooked. I try to contribute. I'm not heard. Sometimes I'm talked over. I'm afraid to do public speaking, right? Conflicts and negotiations worry me. I just don't like to be around a lot of people. It drains me. That's another one. Right? How do I keep up with the company politics? I can't socialize all the time. Happy hours are not my thing. Right? And I have been told to become more, what was the word? One of my clients had mentioned it just flew out of my mind, but to become more vocal and assertive, right? Something to that effect. I forget the exact word that was said to them, but one of their, feedback was, you've got to become more vocal and assertive so you can put your point across. But, if you remove that from the label, a lot of that is self-expression and your ability to have impactful and influential conversations, right? The other thing about introverts is this idea of, this notion of, A, I don't like to talk to people, and secondly, it drains me a lot. So it's about where you're getting your energy from. So, and I've met introverts who, 1 to 2 people is good enough. Anything from beyond 2 people, they start to get, nervous about having interactions with them. A lot of people don't like spotlight. They don't like to be in the center of it all. Like Brian, my fiance, he's, like he said, I told you before, he's an introvert, and he's like, I'm going to have all these pictures taken. I'm going to be in the center of it all, and that's just going to make me nervous. And it's that too, right? If you're getting success, you start to be on the radar of many people. People start to know you. People will come to you to ask for help or to have you involved in more projects. That's just a byproduct of becoming successful. More business if you're an entrepreneur. And people fear that as well because they feel like their introversion, however they think, what their introversion means to them, is what gets in the way. So those are some flavors of things that they describe as their problems.
And
right?
you just said something important, and to be advised to get more assertive. If you're an introvert and if you're not comfortable in your own skin and how you communicate, and I guess you can tell I'm very comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah.
But if you are all of a sudden going from, sitting in the corner, listening, absorbing, really paying attention and then getting your work done no matter what, but all of a sudden you're getting assertive, you don't know how to be assertive and you come across as not good. You can really irritate some people very quickly. And
assertive doesn't mean you have to be aggressive or loud or anything.
Right.
It's about
putting
putting your point across, right? And people think that's about being the loudness of it. So there was a reason I used the word loud because the notion of being loud and proud and, being verbally very, expressive in group settings is something that is embraced very strongly in corporate cultures as well, right? And today, if you look at the mix of people, there are the core corporate professionals who are doing the 9 to 5, and then there are the entrepreneurs. And there's so many people who are in this employer to entrepreneur journey, right? Especially during COVID, there are so many people who started side hustles, who started new businesses and kept their jobs. Since remote working became, a lot more prevalent, it gave people a lot of opportunity. Now think about introverts in that space where they're employees and they're in one structure and then they're trying to stand up, get something on the side, and they have to be, out there. Like I said, put yourselves out there, make your business known, put a word out there, which requires them to show up in a certain way too. And all those different groups of people, are sort of facing these challenges, or it's a change for them to be something that they're not used to be. So it's almost put them out of their comfort zone. What I implore them to consider is could your introversion just be this idea of, how do I gain my energy? What is it that fills me up, or my gas tank, right? And what level of social interactions is my threshold? And based on that, once you know that, use that, and then plot whatever you need to do in order to get to where you want to. I was just working with...
I was going to say, give us some examples if you could, and I think you were just about to do that.
Yes, absolutely. So I was just working with this mid-career professional, an Indian man in the south of India, and if you're talking about introvert, this would be the stereotypical person, and I love him dearly. He's a great client. We worked together for 6 or 8 months, and he really wanted to get to the next level of manager. Now, what was happening was this gentleman was trying to set time on his own direct manager's calendar to talk about, his career development, and he was just getting, blown off this all the time. When it comes to me, that's his goal. And this gentleman was afraid to even, sitting in India, right, being part of a global team, he had team members in different countries. And this gentleman was afraid to even reach out to somebody outside of his region in his own team to make himself known. Right? They knew him as a team member. He would join team meetings. As we started to look into what is it that he would need to do, would be people should know about him, know that he exists and what he does. And so that was a big challenge for him. But here's the thing, that was basically that critical mass of interactions he needed to really start to then propel forward. So we started with him reaching out to a team member on his team in the same country, so in India, reach out to a team member he hadn't, tell them that he's going through a coaching program with me and that he, is looking to create more connections. And then lo and behold, people love to help people. That person responded in a very supportive way, started giving him some feedback and started helping him. Now, this person's reaction was like, I didn't know they'd be interested in helping me. I said, well, you wouldn't know until you gave them the chance, right? And so
you don't know until you ask. That's right. And I'll say this about entrepreneurs, and I've said this forever. We are the most giving people in the planet. We really are. We want to help you. If you ask us, we will do our level best. If we can't help you, we'll find somebody that we can refer you to. Just ask us.
Oh, and ask and then be okay to receive as well as business owners, right? It's not, it's a service-based, but you're deserving to receive, as well in terms of your services. So, just quickly wrapping up that story. Then that person got excited, reaches out to a member on his team outside India. It started with UK. So we kind of just spawned out of, coming out of these connections, spawning out of India, then in the UK, then in the US, and then people outside of his team. And then I sat and drafted emails with him for his manager, to talk to her and said, okay, I want to get promoted this year. When do the conversations need to happen? What do I need to demonstrate? And then this person started to ask for opportunities, started to then prepare for presentations. And I'm very glad to report, as of this year, the person did get promoted. But it was
congratulations.
Thank you. I was very excited about that. This was a person who would have a hard time talking even one-on-one of that, just sharing what was on his mind, right? We women are much better at it, so that sort of was playing into it as well. But it was it was a tough engagement in that sense because I really had to draw him out of it. But once he started to look at his introversion not as an impediment, as I said before, what if he could switch it? His ability to listen, ability to synthesize information quickly, just taking in all these inputs in a meeting and then being able to articulate it and provide insight. When he started to see that as a skill that he has versus just somebody who's just sitting in the background and listening, he realized that, I could make this happen. And he had to demonstrate he could do that. He had to demonstrate he could lead a team of 2, 3, 4 people that he was doing and take them to the next level as well.
I've said this before, but introversion is not a disease. It doesn't need to be cured. It should be managed and it should be understood, but you don't need to cure it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's the same way, I gave a talk recently, the myths about introverts and extroverts, and I sort of outlined these descriptions, narratives, and stories about introversion and extroversion. It's the same way for extroverts too. They think by talking. They do gain energy in social situations. There's many different parameters that contribute to an extroversion. It's not just energy. It's not just socially, being more social versus being antisocial. It's all these different things and what it means to you as an individual being an introvert and an extrovert. Either ways, there are good and bad. The idea is to pick up the good, right, and use that to your benefit. That's the whole point. There's the what it means and then what it means for you.
It seems to me, Prachee, yeah, exactly. It seems to me that talking about being an introvert or an ambivert or an extrovert or whatever it is, however you want to style yourself, that's something fairly new, isn't it? And I don't know how far back to go, but maybe 5 to 10 years people are aware of it, where we just used to get called names. I mean, I've been called antisocial. I've been called frigid by people who don't know me. What do you mean frigid? I'm reading a book. Go away. Just leave me alone.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
If you don't understand why introverts are sitting there quietly and absorbing and listening, you need to understand. You need to figure out how to operate with us, and we need to figure out how to operate with everybody else. I mean, I prefer to be around other introverts any day of the week because, honest to God, they're the smartest people on the planet.
Oh, absolutely. The amount of information they absorb. And just, if you're an avid reader and an introvert, I bet you've read more than 52 books than any other, some of those business leaders were quoted, right? And there's a lot of business leaders who are introverts themselves and super successful in what they've done. And, a funny example I'll give you is, as I said before, my sister is an introvert and she's a Bollywood movie director. And my best friend, who also works in a bank here in New York, is also an introvert. And we were at our sailing club last year in the summertime at one of the long weekend picnics. And they both come up, they sign their names on the badges, they look at me and they're like, well, does this mean we have to talk to people? And so I'm going, how am I surrounded by all of you? And I just burst out laughing. But they took their own time, right? And maybe, I forget how much time had passed, but over the course of the evening, my sister was sitting and having conversations with 6 or 7 people. She was sitting on the table part of the picnic table with 6 or 7 people around her having a conversation and really enjoying it. So it's also a matter of how much time you need to settle in, right? And just be there and be comfortable and then have a conversation. Sometimes it's just, your terms are different. As an extrovert, you can jump into any conversation, and for introverts, it might take a little bit longer. So it's just what's right for you.
Well, and the thing is about, introverts being out in public, and I've often said, look, I'm only good, more than 2 people is too people for me. 3 people, I got to go. I'm only good for about 59 3/4 minutes. Which is kind of a joke. It's really not true. If I find you interesting and we can converse, we can go for hours. And it doesn't matter how many people. But if it's just pablum, I'm gone. I can't take it. It drains me.
Mm-hmm. And, you brought up a good point, Denise. It's about being interesting. Right? We are so afraid of having interesting conversations these days because it's like, oh, how was your weekend? It was good, or, well, how's the weather today? We tend to stay at the superficial sides of the party. It doesn't matter if you're an introvert or extrovert at this point. If you just are in an elevator, or if you're in a grocery store, or you're in a cafe, just listen to people. Our level of interesting conversations have to increase because, like you said, once you move past that surface level conversation and truly ask, hey, what's going on with you? Or have you done something interesting? Then people will start to tell you. Sometimes it's just asking the right question. I experimented with this. Now in my office, or if I go meet people, I said, is there something interesting you did? Or, did you have an experience in the last few weeks or months since we've met that you want to share? And people will talk to you about that versus just asking, hey, how was your weekend? That's a conversation starter, right?
Very much so. And one of my questions that I had written down to ask you was, can you tell us about a particularly memorable moment or experience in your career, either of them? Because I really want to know what it is that you do and how you go about
it. You mean as an introvert?
Either one, introvert or cybersecurity. We're talking about both today.
Oh boy.
So
sorry. I have a story to tell. Yeah. So this is a little bit of everything mixed in. So one of my, I would say, the most interesting and challenging roles in cybersecurity was when I was hired to basically rescue a failing investment in some strategic technology in cybersecurity. It was in multi-million dollars worth of strategic investments, and some very unhappy business stakeholders, right? Because there was money being invested in cybersecurity tech, which over a period of 2-3 years had not come to fruition. There were projects that were long overdue. Money was going in, and resources were being wasted. So all of that good stuff. Now, not only that, I also inherited on the side, which I thought was the more challenging part of this role, was acquiring or inheriting a team of 9 men and 1 woman, all my age or up to 30-some years my senior. And these are core cybersecurity practitioners, and I wasn't as experienced as them in cybersecurity. And then they were of all ethnicities. And the reason I say that was more interesting was because that was the people dealing aspect of it, because I had this team of people who were extremely, like I said, intelligent, accomplished, many of them introverts, because these are hardcore techie people trying to get, work done. And over a period of another 2 to 3 years, we really turned that entire portfolio of investments around. We reduced our costs by 20%. We brought, long overdue projects to completion. And so we were very, very happy about that from, the outcome perspective. But the journey through that, as a woman leading a team of men, an ambivert woman having introverts on her team, and then people of all backgrounds and ethnicities. So it was, a full immersion from a diversity inclusion standpoint. It was a full immersion from a subject matter standpoint, and growth as a leader. Like, what did I need to be in order to serve this team so that they can then become a diverse, high-performing team in cybersecurity, helping the company get to where they needed to get to from a cybersecurity standpoint so that they were in a position to run their business in a secure manner. And it was brilliant. I think what we put together, that's something I'm very proud of, and it was incredibly challenging because I was, when my then boss told me about this, I was like, excuse me, what? So it was a big risk I took, and I'm so happy it paid off. I had to connect with every person on the team individually, learn about their life journey, why were they there, why were they still there, what did they want to see out of it, and their personality types. So I really had to adapt myself to their personality types, less as being, type A, type B, type C, doesn't matter, or, the MBTIs, but it was more about introverts and extroverts. We ended up dividing the team. Some of them were like, I don't want to talk to people. I'm a subject matter person. I can help you design solutions. And the other person was like, I don't want to do some more technical stuff. I'm okay to talk to people, so I'll do that. And we actually organized ourselves around their interests and proclivities at the time, less than, it was sort of non-traditional, because that's not how you generally allocate work on the team, right? You do it based on your skills only.
And I'm so glad you brought that up because, I mean, and what you were telling us about is true leadership. When you find out who your team, who they are, what they are, how they operate, how they prefer to operate, and just as importantly, Prachee, what they can teach you through the process. I'm willing to bet that you learned some brand new skills doing this.
Oh, brand new skills and really understood, there's really understood sort of we call gender dynamics in a corporate workplace also, right? I mean, being a woman, we have our experiences in the corporate workplace, but being surrounded by, even in management consulting, I was always, sometimes the only one in the room. And I've had those experiences, but this being a leader, leading a group of men, which is a very common scenario in cybersecurity and technology in a lot of technical spaces now, because women, they're growing up the ladder. There's a lot of these situations that occur. A lot of women come to me to seek support for that as well. But that is truly also learning from a gender dynamic standpoint how we think differently, right? And that's a gift. How we solve problems, how we approach things. So all those books that you read about, gender dynamics and things like that, and your own experiences, you start to look at them in a different light and say, okay, what is this person trying to do for me? And on the social side, I'll tell you something very, very, it's humorous, but it was also a very, insightful experience for me. Like, we had gone out as a team for dinner to celebrate a win, and I'm a grown woman living in New York, living by myself, and it was late at night that night. And around, I got back home around 11:30, and we had a group text going in our system. One of the gentlemen who has daughters of his own just texted and said, hey, he texted in the group chat and said, I reached home. Did everybody reach home safely? And then he said, Prachee, ? So that was his non-intrusive way of checking in on me to make sure I got home safely without making me feel like he was, he was in that caretaking mode, if I may, which I appreciated, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I know this for certain because I asked him the next day. I said, I saw you texted and you asked me. I wanted to understand, and he said, yeah, absolutely. But I also wanted, I know you're a grown woman, but it's just, in my DNA to do this. And this person is from, the Caribbean, so it's a different culture there, right? So acclimating myself with things like small gestures like that, right? And I have to tell you, we pulled some long days during those days, and there were times when I would forget lunch, and somebody would bring lunch and put it on my table because one of those team members saw that I hadn't eaten. Right, and at some other times we would take offense saying, hey, I don't need to be taken care of. I can take care of myself. I'm an independent woman and stuff like that. But I appreciated those gestures also. So I learned, Steve, from that standpoint, that I don't have to be a woman and proving myself out there all the time. It's okay to have that level of relational connections on the team as well, and, allowing to give and receive on both sides, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and it's a very Southern thing. Listen, whenever, I have guests here, I'll make a big gumbo, and guests are here, and they are ordered when they're driving out, text me when you get home. Let me know that you're okay. Yeah. And we all do. We're all texting back and forth, I'm home, thank you, boy. It's just you're being kind and compassionate and careful with the people around you. I don't understand, truly, I don't, why women need to constantly say, well, I can open the door myself. What the heck is wrong with you? Somebody wanted to open the door for you as an act of kindness. Get over yourself. And that's all I have to say.
I think that's and that's what I was sort of getting at, because I was checking myself about these things, right? Because we get into such a proving mode that as women too, we were stereotyped in a certain kind of a box, right? So all of us are trying to prove that we actually are not in the box by trying to do things that are anti-box. So, so then we're like, okay, now I don't need this, right? I can do it. I'm independent. And yes, I think there's a balance there that can be had. And also as a leader, as listening and not being able to, not just ignoring or overlooking people's inputs was tremendous as well, both as a woman and as that, especially, because the male-female thing, I'm a female leader in this organization, I have to prove something. A lot of that is a baggage that we're carrying with ourselves and trying to get rid of as well at the same time. So I would say that experience, I think, was one of the most valuable experiences in my whole life, and it's completely shaped me as a leader, as a person, as a woman, overall.
But you took it in. I mean, you identified it and you ran with it. I have to ask you, Prachee, one of true introverts are typically pretty quiet. And I'll give you an example. Many years ago, over 20 years ago, I was invited to be on this board for a local nonprofit. Don't ask me why. I always get invited to those things, and now I know better. I don't do it. But I was sitting there with my first. Time and skills. They do, and only 20% are going to do the work, and I'm always part of that 20%. And after a while, I'm just irritated.
Exactly.
But it was my first day there, and everybody's talking, and I'm listening, and I was talking back. I was participating, but mostly I was asking questions. And there was this one woman there who she was just there, and I would watch her eyes track every one of us. She never said a word. I don't mind telling you, she scared the hell out of me. She really did. All I could think was, what is this woman thinking? What is going on? Does she hate us? What's going on? I caught up with her in the break room, and we had we had a chat. Turns out she is an introvert, and she has been my best friend for 20-some-odd years. I mean,
wow.
I know she's very, very dear to me, but I kept thinking, what is she thinking? I was fascinated because she was completely passive. There was nothing on her face, nothing. I was like, how's she doing that? Because I've been told I have very expressive eyes. If I don't like you, you know it. So it's hard to be an introvert with that going on.
Me too. Yeah, I cannot play poker. I am like the world's worst poker player ever. You do not want me on your team.
No, it shows on my face. It really does. But it doesn't show on Maggie's face. And we had this conversation, and I said something kind of rude because the meeting, not about her, it was like, what the heck was that all about? And she just started laughing. She said, I wondered when you were going to catch on. I went, I like you. And that was it. We were friends after that.
Well, she didn't say anything because maybe she was like, it's not, worth her time to say anything, right? It's not like I said, she just didn't think it would be value add, and actually she conserved her energy because there's no point banging your head on a wall that's just not going to it's a wall, So I think it was incredibly smart of her, and that's a great example of a superpower, right? She knew exactly when to conserve her energy.
She does.
Where to stay up. And it's a great leadership trait. Because
I had never faced it. I had never seen anybody sit there completely immobile like that. And I was thinking, oh, my God. I mean, I was fascinated, kind of freaked out, but fascinated. And as it turns out, another woman.
There was a mystique around her.
There
was a mystique, right? She's like, what is she thinking? Right. And you're attracted to that because you're just like, what is this person about? What are they thinking? Because they're not telling. And it's a great trait, especially in negotiations. Right.
Yeah.
They tell you not to talk first, right? They will ask you to allow everybody to express themselves. And if you're a good leader, you will invite everybody to the table to share their thoughts, and then you will speak. And as a good leader, you should be the last one to speak anyways.
Exactly. So, and she's trained me unknowingly, and I'll have to let her listen to this, but I've been in situations where I'll just say, okay, do Maggie, and I just shut up. And it scares people. It really worries them.
Totally. Because it's like, well, this person needs to say something. Now she's not saying anything. And, what's going on? Is she okay about it? Is she not okay about it? Right? It actually makes people uncomfortable because you're not saying anything. And I think introverts have that naturally. That's one thing we actually absolutely work on with, I work on with introverts to say, did you understand that your ability to listen or to absorb information is a superpower? It's not don't see it as an ability to, and I'm saying this, in a very clear way here. It's more conversation and question based when I'm in a session. But what if this is the superpower? and you're not seeing that as a lack of self-expression, but discernment about when to talk and when not to talk.
Ooh, discernment. That's perfect. And you know what I have found too, and I know you have, is that the less we talk, people get a little bit nervous, and that's when they start blabbing, and you learn all kinds of things they didn't want you to know.
Yeah, just a bit.
I feel like I'm getting out my light bulb and shining it in your eyes. Like, tell me, tell me everything I want to know.
Right, and extroverts naturally are expressive. Some people are. Some people just like to hear themselves talk, and there are some people who genuinely like to talk through problems. Right? And you also have extroverts who walk around the room talking to themselves because they just like.
So what's wrong with that?
More auditory.
I mean, introverts do that. I talk to myself all the time. I frequently, and I live alone. I'm the smartest person in the room. I live alone. I can say that with impunity. Yeah. But I always talk out loud because, and I'll tell you why. Because when we're just thinking thoughts, we've got 100 miles a minute going on in there. We can't pick out which thought we really need to concentrate on. But when we stop and we say, okay, what's bothering me, and you speak it out loud, you can only say one thing at a time. So talk out loud. Right. Just don't do it in the Piggly Wiggly or the grocery store.
Yeah, and
unless you can convince people you're on the phone.
Absolutely, and in the neuroscience books, like there's scientific evidence that we think 70,000 some thoughts. Right, our brains are just engaged all the time, scanning situations, filtering between fight or threat or not, and stuff like that. And so, to your point, focusing your thoughts on certain things, on the problem at hand, or being able to divert your attention from things that you don't want to, those are all skills that have nothing to do with the label of introversion and extroversion, right? It's just we ring fence ourselves with these labels. And, what I really appreciate that has been coming out in the science as well is the fact that regardless of who you are, where you are health-wise, mentally, or personality-wise, we can change ourselves. We can literally unplug, unwire our brains, unlearn things that we have learned. It's not going to be easy in certain situations. And then learn new things and rewire our brains in ways that are conducive and supportive for ourselves.
Give us some practical tips and tools to do that, if you would.
Just a simple. So I'll give you an example about this other client I had, a person in the UK, gentleman as well. He is called himself introvert and is very non-confrontational, to the point where he said acquired clients who were practically just bullying him into giving service. And he was a customer success manager. I don't know how he survived all those years in that role, but he used to have a hard time saying no to clients. And they used to take him, for a ride. And working with him, practically non-confrontation for him was a fear. He wrapped it around saying, "Well, I'm an introvert. I can't have difficult conversations with people. I basically end up being a yes man." Again, to say, what if this wasn't an introversion issue? What if, let's define what introversion means for you. So that's one thing for him. For him, it was his inability to talk to people, his inability to express himself, or saying what was on his mind in a way that was well received by the party he wanted to say it to. Removing the biases that were in his head, implanted in his head because of the label introversion. And practically for him, what he ended up doing was, well, okay, what if this was not a limitation? How do I get to a place where I can tell a customer no? Part of that, we started digging into what was it that put him in a place of becoming that non-confrontation. What was he fearing, right? Getting down to the crux of the issue, saying, what is it that you're fearing? In creative thinking, critical thinking world, there's the concept of 5 whys, right? You keep asking, saying, okay, I do X, Y, Z, Y, and then you get to the next level. And it's very rapid exercise you do. So, I do like
that.
To confront my clients.
Yeah, I actually do that, and it's brilliant.
Yeah. So that's what we started working on and got to the crux of it, saying, he's just like that. And mind you, this trait of his was not limited to work. It showed up in his relationships. It showed up in his friendships. So he said, I never end up asserting which restaurant I go to. I just kind of go with the flow with what everybody wants. So even if I really want tacos, I'll end up going and eating steak because that's what everybody else wanted, right? But his issue was, even though I expressed myself, I won't be seen and heard. That was a belief he truly was living with, that he was deeply embedded in his subconscious mind. And we did the 5 whys multiple times over. And that's why just very quick exercise. That's why I gave that as an example to get to it. And I said, do you now connect it with your introversion or your understanding of you being an introvert? He's like, yeah, I see it. And I said, is it really connected? And he said, no, it's not. And after that awareness, we then said, can you unlearn this? And then we started to say, okay, if you are not this, if you did not know this about you, or if this was not true about you, right, that you cannot confront people, what could be possible for you? How would you approach it? And then we did some role plays around some difficult scenarios. And again, I was very fortunate, and fortunate for him too, he got to practice that when he actually ended up offboarding a client for his company after several years, and this was a long-term client, on amicable terms, but because they could not serve their increasing demands, and that was not conducive to the company, and he was able to have that conversation versus running to his manager all the time. So what we ended up doing was coming to recognition, really reaching down into understanding what was it at the crux of the issue, unlearning that. It took a while. It didn't happen in a day or so. It was several weeks worth of work, and he was very diligent about it, which I appreciate that about him. And then he literally built new neural pathways, which is the way our neurons are connected and our thoughts are fired in our brain. That's the actual physical rewiring of the brain. And if we were to do a scan, I'm sure we'll see it. But that's what the scientific theory of it is, and he's able to do that now.
I've heard this about neural pathways many times, and I'm not entirely sure I understand it. Well, I think I understand it. I've never really delved deep into it. But you've mentioned it, and several people have, and I think it's important because it's kind of like paving over an old rutted road, if I understand it correctly. You've got this mess. You don't want to go down that road. It's full of potholes. It makes you miserable. Your neck hurts when you get out of the car. It's just not good. So you basically change your mind, you change your mindset, and you pave over that with new tarmac. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, or just new pathways altogether. Let's say a trail in the woods, right? It's washed away, rain down, or you just don't want to walk that path. It's going to lead you straight into a sinkhole or something, right? That's the pathway you've been fighting. So think about a belief as being a certain pathway, and I'm oversimplifying this, right? So neural pathways is really about neurons connecting to each other. The neurons are the nerve cells in the brain and our central nervous system, right? And neurons that wire together, fire together. So if a thought is running through those pathways, so you're constantly thinking like that, that's what makes our mindset, right? So this is the scientific sort of explanation of what happens when we're continuously thinking the same thing over and over again. The idea is you break that and you reconstruct new neural pathways.
I like that.
So, does that make sense? And then it's called neuroplasticity. And a big example of that, my own mother had in some freak this thing during her surgery had something called embolic showers in her brain, and she lost her ability to speak and was paralyzed. It was just a side effect of this it just went south. So not good. So she comes out of that, and then the neurologist said her brain will try to relocate all those functions into the other side. That is a classic example of her, and she was in her late 50s at the time. He said, we don't know how much of her motor functions will come back. But she does it. This woman, after 6 months of physical therapy, after, all of that, literally has her, with the exception of her pinky finger, with a little bit, off sometimes, she, she regained all of her motor skills that she had lost on her right side.
Oh, right? Good. I was going to ask you, how is she?
Oh, she's good, but that was a classic exam. She was determined. She was like, I am not going to use a walker my whole life, And it was literally, it's a miracle, a big blessing in some way, but her body was able to do that, right? That is, I mean, it's not an example of how that could happen. So similarly, our thoughts, you have the ability to create new pathways in your brain. Our brain is extremely trainable, but yeah, if you're not aware of it, you're not intentional about it, it can keep firing the same pathways. That's why sometimes you're just stuck in a thinking loop.
And that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I mean, we identify ourselves, or other people identify us for us as introvert, ambivert, extrovert, whatever. And sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. But I think what we're understanding now, and in the last several years, and as a result of this conversation that we're having today, we have to define what kind of personality we have. I mean, I've always known that I was an introvert before there was even a term for it, I think. I just knew that I desperately needed to be left alone. And when I say leave me alone, I'm not kidding. I need to be alone. It's how I function. But I'm also pig-headed, and I don't have any trouble. Yeah, and I don't have any trouble with the word no at all. It's not about your ability to talk to people. And it's not your skill set. You're not antisocial. It's just you like to spend time alone more than you like to spend time in other people's company. And that's the introversion for you. For some other people, it may be, this ability to confront people or have your own self-expression or being heard. That's why it's like, it's, what is right out there and what is right for you, right in life for you. That's, I think, the quest we're all on. And what we tend to do is compare ourselves to these notions and then judge ourselves to be less than that. And I'm guilty of it. I'm not saying I'm far from it, right? I go into the most self-critical mode ever. And we all do. We all do. Honestly, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, those labels don't help, because those labels compound it, I feel, because then it becomes a benchmark suddenly that you either meet or you miss, right?
You do. And as women in particular, I find we talk ugly to ourselves. And I've often said, if any living person spoke to me in a Walmart parking lot the way I speak to myself, I'd need bail money.
Yeah.
It would get ugly real quick. So why do we do that to ourselves? That's a whole other conversation, I think.
It's just subconscious training, right? That are the messages we acquired, and somehow that just becomes our dominant thought pattern. Again, those are dominant thought patterns. You're the only thinker in your mind. Louise Hay had said that several years ago. I heard her, one of her tapes. You are the only thinker in your mind. We attach voices to it. We attach names to it. We attach labels to it. It's the same way. If you're an introvert, what is that voice in your head telling you about being an introvert? Right? I'm an introvert, but you can be an exceptional leader because you're an introvert, and you can pull together a group of extroverts. You can lead extremely well because you have the ability to listen and synthesize what they have to say. Complementing that, extroverts can lead a team of introverts because they can really draw out their skills. If an extrovert is committed to that team, to say, okay, I'm going to help these people, become who they want to become. As an extrovert, they can draw that energy out of those people too. So in a positive way. So there's power on both sides. It's the ability to come together and work together, right? And for all of us to move towards our hopes, dreams, and desires.
Well, and how you described working with your team by going to each one of them and, delving deep and finding out who they are, what they bring to the table. That was brilliant. Yeah. So I hope everybody will go back and listen to that. Prachee, we are just about out of time. Where can people find you?
They can find me on Think.Design.Cyber or Think.Design.Cyber
Perfect. Oh, thank you so much for being such a delightful and fascinating guest, and for sharing great tips and advice on how to get your voice heard if you're an introvert. And before we wrap up today's episode, if you have enjoyed today's episode and found our insights, mostly hers, helpful, please leave us a review and rating on iTunes. Your feedback really does help us improve and reach more people on their own success journeys. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and share your part in Success Radio with your friends and colleagues. And go look for Prachee. Prachee, one more time, tell people where they can find you.
Well, I neglected to add, they can find me on LinkedIn and direct message me if they have any questions. And they can find me on Think.Design.Cyber.com or Think.Design.Cyberleadershub.com. And that is all on my LinkedIn profile as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next one. Hey, and tell our friend Susan Harrow hi for me. This was such a great introduction.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.